My mother-in-law slipped something into my wine at family dinner. I quietly swapped glasses with her favorite son. What happened 20 minutes later ended 3 marriages. My name is Marin. I am 38 years old, and for the last 11 years, my entire career has been making sure that nobody can tamper with a sample without leaving a trail. I certify chain of custody for a network of clinical laboratories. When a specimen moves from a nurse's hand to a courier's cooler to a technician's bench, I am the person who signs the paperwork that says it was never touched, never swapped, never altered. I have testified about it in 2 court cases. I dream in initials and timestamps. So when my mother-in-law handed me a glass of Cabernet at her own dining table, handed it to me personally, not from the tray where the other 11 glasses sat, and said, "I poured this one just for you, sweetheart," I noticed 3 things in about 4 seconds. First, the glass was warmer than the others. It had been held, carried, waited with. Second, there was a faint ring of grit clinging to the inside curve, just below the wine line, the kind of residue you get when a powder doesn't fully dissolve and somebody swirls instead of stirs. Third, Verna Hale was watching my mouth, not my eyes, my mouth. I smiled. I thanked her. I set the glass down at my place, setting exactly where she wanted it, and I did what I have done at every Hale family dinner for 9 years. I did not drink it. I never drink at Hale family dinners. Verna knew that once. She had forgotten. She had forgotten because forgetting me was the family sport, and because she was so focused on the ending of her plan that she stopped checking the beginning of it. Here is what happened in the next 20 minutes. A wine glass shattered against a 60-year-old lace tablecloth. A notary public packed up her stamp and her journal and walked out the front door without notarizing a single page. A man I had called family for 9 years stood in the kitchen doorway with red wine soaking through his shirt, screaming at his own mother. And in that dining room, under the brass chandelier Verna polished every Sunday in front of 14 witnesses, the first of 3 marriages began, very quietly, to die. One of those marriages was mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand why my mother-in-law tried to drug me at a celebration dinner, you need to understand what was sitting in a folder at the end of that table, what was scheduled at the county courthouse for 9 o'clock the following Monday morning, and what I found on a printer tray 8 days earlier that told me exactly what my husband's family thought I was worth. Welcome back to Calm Karma Stories, where ordinary people face impossible family moments and walk out with their dignity intact. If you have ever been the one expected to fix everything, pay for everything, and say nothing, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe, because you do not want to miss how this one ends. But let me back up. 9 years, to be exact. I met Elias Hale at a conference in a hotel ballroom with terrible carpet and worse coffee. He was a structural engineer presenting on bridge fatigue, and I was there auditing a lab vendor 2 floors up, and we ended up at the same sad little bar cart at 9 p.m. He ordered a whiskey. I ordered what I always order, sparkling water, 2 limes, not 1, not a lemon. 2 limes, cut thin, floated, not squeezed. The bartender got it wrong, and Elias sent it back for me before I could open my mouth, and I remember thinking, here is a man who pays attention to small things. I married him 20 months later. It would take me 9 years to learn that Elias paid attention to small things and went completely, conveniently blind around large ones, as long as the large things were wearing his mother's perfume. Let me tell you about my job for 1 more minute, because it matters. I'm the Director of Quality and Compliance for a regional clinical laboratory network, 6 labs. About 400 employees. When a hospital sends us a blood draw, a biopsy, a toxicology screen, there is a document that travels with it, and every single person who touches that sample signs that document with a date and a time. If the seal is broken, we reject it. If a signature is missing, we reject it. If the timeline doesn't reconcile, we reject it, even if rejecting it costs us the client, because a sample you can't account for is worse than no sample at all. People think my job is about chemistry. It isn't. My job is about one question, asked over and over, in writing. Who touched this, and when? Keep that question in your pocket. We're going to need it. The Hale family, when I married into it, looked from the outside, like something out of a hardware store calendar. Verna and Roscoe Hale, married 41 years, living in the big white farmhouse Roscoe's mother built onto in the 60s. 2 sons. Elias, my husband, the older one, steady, quiet, allergic to conflict the way some people are allergic to shellfish. And Dexter, Dex, the younger one, the one whose framed baby pictures outnumbered Elias's on the hallway wall by a count I once made while waiting for a bathroom. 14-3, if you're curious. I counted. Counting is what I do. And above them all, in a small brick house at the edge of the same property, lived the person who actually held that family together, Elias's grandmother, Opal Hale. 86 years old when I met her, sharp as a paper cut, a retired school bookkeeper who kept 40 years of household ledgers in a cedar chest and could tell you what a dozen eggs cost in 1974 without looking. Opal and I understood each other within about 10 minutes of meeting. She watched me decline wine at my first Hale Thanksgiving, watched Verna make a little performance out of it. "Oh, Marin doesn't drink with us. She's very particular." And later, in the kitchen, Opal pressed a glass of sparkling water into my hand. 2 limes, cut thin, floated. "I pay attention too," she said. I loved that woman more than I have loved almost anyone. Here's the part that's hard to admit. For 9 years, I knew exactly what my role in the Hale family was, and I performed it anyway. I was the fixer, the competent one, the one with a laptop and a spreadsheet and a calm voice. When Roscoe's Medicare paperwork got tangled, they called Marin. When Dex's business needed just a quick look at its books, they called Marin. When the property tax notice came with a number nobody understood, Verna didn't call her sons. She called me. And every time I fixed something, the same sentence got said around that table, warm as gravy and twice as heavy. Family doesn't keep receipts. That was the Hale family motto. Verna said it the way other people say grace. It meant, don't ask to be paid back. It meant, don't bring up last time. It meant, whatever we take from you, the asking price of belonging is that you never, ever write it down. Family doesn't keep receipts. I want you to remember that sentence, because I am a woman who keeps receipts for a living, and the Hale family was about to find out what that actually means. Now let me tell you about Dex, because the whole thing turns on Dex. Dexter Hale is 4 years younger than my husband, and he is what happens when a boy is told from birth that he is the interesting one. He's charming. He is genuinely, infuriatingly charming. The kind of man who remembers your dog's name and forgets that he owes you $11,000, and somehow both of those facts feel like compliments when he's standing in front of you. He ran a landscaping company, then a food truck, then a boutique dock building operation, which is a real phrase he said to a table of adults with a straight face. Each business was going to be the one. Each one ended the same way. Quietly, with Verna's checkbook and a family dinner where nobody was allowed to ask questions, because, say it with me, family doesn't keep receipts. Dex married Annika 6 years ago. I liked Annika immediately and felt sorry for her almost as fast. She was a pediatric nurse, practical, funny in a dry way that went right over the Hale family's heads, and she spent most family dinners doing what I did, watching. Sometimes our eyes would meet across the table during one of Dex's announcements. Some new venture, some new truck, some new opportunity. And we would have an entire conversation without moving our faces. And then there was the lake property, 11 acres on Cade Lake, 40 minutes north of town, with a cedar cabin Opal's late husband built with his own hands in 1971. That land was the crown jewel of the Hale family, and everyone knew it. Developers had been circling Cade Lake for a decade. The parcel next door sold 4 years ago for just under $2 million, and after that sale, something changed at family dinners. The cabin stopped being a place and started being a number. Verna started saying things like, when the lake money comes. Dex started bringing brochures. But here's what mattered, and here's what nobody in that family ever quite forgave. The lake property didn't belong to Verna. It didn't belong to Roscoe. It belonged to Opal. And in the spring of 2021, Opal put it, along with her savings and her investment accounts, into a revocable living trust. The Opal Hale Family Trust, standard estate planning. Her attorney, a careful, gray man named Mr. Feldstein, drew it up. And Opal named a successor trustee, the person who would manage everything when she died or couldn't. Not her daughter-in-law Verna, who had been auditioning for the role for 30 years. Not Dex, the favorite. Not even Elias. She named me. I found out sitting in Mr. Feldstein's office with Opal on a Tuesday afternoon because Opal insisted I be there when she signed. I told her it should be family. She looked at me over her glasses. She had a way of doing that, lowering her chin like a judge. And she said the sentence I have thought about every single day since. Marin, I've kept books my whole life. You don't pick a trustee because you love them. You pick a trustee because they'll tell you a true number even when the room wants a false one. Then she smiled and added, also, your family. Don't be dense. Opal died on a cold, clear morning in January of this year. She was 95. She died in her own bed in the little brick house, with her ledgers in the cedar chest and her affairs in perfect order, because of course they were. I sat with her the night before, and the last fully lucid thing she said to me was about, of all things, my drink. There was a glass of sparkling water on her nightstand. I'd made it for myself, 2 limes, cut thin, and she pointed at it and said, you and your limes. And she laughed. And then she said, watch your glass, honey. I thought she meant I was going to knock it off the nightstand. I have replayed that sentence 400 times since March. The trust became irrevocable the day Opal died, and I became the acting trustee of roughly $2.6 million in land, cabin, and accounts with clear written instructions. The trust held everything together for 5 years. Income from the accounts paid the property taxes and upkeep. After 5 years, the trustee, me, had discretion to sell or distribute with the stated goal of preserving the lake property for family use so long as it is reasonably practical. Opal wrote that phrase herself. Mr. Feldstein told me she dictated it twice to get the commas right. 5 years. Remember that number. It's the whole war. Because 11 days after Opal's funeral, 11 days, I checked my calendar, I keep receipts. Verna invited Elias and me to Sunday dinner, sat us down under the brass chandelier, and slid a manila folder across the table like she was dealing cards. Inside was a purchase offer from a development group called Cade Lake Partners. $1.9 million for the lake parcel. Cash. 90-day close. And clipped to the front, a sticky note in Verna's looping handwriting. Marin, just needs your signature. V. Just needs your signature. Like a permission slip. Like a formality. I read the offer twice while the pot roast went cold. Then I said, as gently as I knew how, the trust doesn't allow this. Not for 5 years. Opal was specific. The temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees. Verna's smile stayed exactly where it was, which somehow made it worse. She said, Opal was 95, sweetheart. She wasn't thinking about the family's future. That's our job now. And when I didn't move, when I just sat there with my hands folded on top of that folder, she reached across the table, patted my wrist, and delivered the motto like a closing argument. We're not going to make this a legal thing, Marin. Family doesn't keep receipts. I looked at my husband. I want to be honest with you about this moment, because it's the moment I go back to. Elias was studying his mashed potatoes like they were a bridge that might fail, he said. And I remember the exact words, because certain sentences fossilize the instant they're spoken. He said, maybe we just look at the numbers with an open mind. Not, my wife is the trustee. Not, Grandma wrote what she wrote. Just, an open mind. Neutral. Elias was always neutral. The way a referee is neutral, except that a referee at least blows the whistle sometimes. I declined the offer that week. In writing. Certified mail to Cade Lake Partners, copy to Mr. Feldstein, copy to the family. Because that's what a trustee does. And that letter, polite, procedural, 3 paragraphs long, was the beginning of everything that came after. Here's what I did not know yet, and what it took me until 8 days before that dinner to learn. Dex needed that sale. Not wanted, needed. 2 years earlier, the boutique dock building operation had borrowed $180,000 from a private lender, and Dex, charming, sunny, allergic to paperwork Dex, had listed the Cade Lake property as collateral on a personal financial statement. Property he did not own. Property that sat inside a trust with his grandmother's name on it and my signature guarding the door. The lender had started asking pointed questions in February. By spring, the pointed questions had become a demand letter with a deadline. And Verna knew. Verna had known for months, which meant that when she slid that folder across the table 11 days after burying Opal, she wasn't planning the family's future. She was covering her favorite son's debt with his grandmother's land through my hand. And I had said no. What followed my letter was not an explosion. The Hale family doesn't explode. The Hale family erodes. Let me give you the erosion in order, because the order is the whole point. Small scenes, each one deniable on its own, each one a data point when you line them up. Scene 1, late March. Verna calls me, not Elias, to chat about Easter. 4 minutes in, she mentions, lightly, like she's mentioning weather, that Mr. Feldstein is getting up there, and that the family has met a wonderful estate attorney, very modern, named Bram Corliss, who thinks the trust language is more flexible than people realize. I say that's interesting. I write down the date, the time, and the name. April 2nd, 6:47 p.m. Bram Corliss. Receipt number 1. Scene 2. Easter dinner itself. I'm holding my usual glass, sparkling water, 2 limes, and Verna, carving ham, says to the whole table, without looking up, "Marin, honey, you seem stressed lately." You've been so rigid since Opal passed. Grief does strange things to people. Rigid, strange, seeds planted in public, in front of 13 witnesses. I remember Annika glancing at me across the table with a small frown, like she'd heard a wrong note in a familiar song. Receipt number 2. Scene 3. Mid-April. Dex shows up at my office. 40 minutes across town, unannounced, with 2 coffees and that smile. He puts a coffee on my desk, sits on the edge of a chair like a man who has practiced looking casual, and for 20 minutes he is wonderful, funny, warm, asking about my work. And then, at the door, on his way out, he turns and says, "You know, Grandma loved you, right? She'd hate to see the family torn apart over paperwork. Over paperwork!" A $2.6 million trust, reduced to paperwork. I logged the visit in my calendar the minute the door closed. Receipt number 3. Scene 4. And this is the one that should have told me everything. Early May. Elias comes home from a Sunday at his parents' house. A Sunday I skipped, and he's quiet through dinner. And finally, loading the dishwasher, he says to the plates, not to me, "Mom's worried about you. She thinks maybe you've been leaning on things to cope." Since Opal, I turned around. I said, "Leaning on what things, Elias?" And my husband of 9 years, who has watched me order sparkling water with 2 limes at every restaurant, every wedding, every funeral, who knows I haven't had a drink since college because I simply never liked who it made the people around me become. My husband shrugged and said, "I told her that didn't sound like you. He told her it didn't sound like me. Not, that's a lie. Not, how dare you?" He filed it under differences of opinion, the way he filed everything his mother did, and he went back to the dishes. Receipt number 4. And this one I underlined, because here's what I understood that night. Standing in my own kitchen with a dish towel in my hands, Verna wasn't just pressuring me anymore. She was building a story, and the story had a genre. Marin is rigid. Marin is strange. Marin is grieving. Marin is leaning on things. You don't plant those seeds for fun. You plant them because somewhere down the line, you intend to harvest. I didn't know yet what the harvest looked like, but I did what I do. I opened a folder, a real one, navy, the kind with the elastic band, and I started keeping the receipts the Hale family swore we didn't keep. Dates, times, quotes, verbatim, written down within the hour, names of witnesses. I built a chain of custody for my own life. Then in June, the pressure went quiet, completely quiet. 3 weeks of nothing. No calls about attorneys, no coffee ambushes, no concern for my stress levels. And I'll be honest with you, quiet is the only thing in this story that ever truly scared me. In my line of work, when a problem stops making noise, it hasn't gone away. It has gone procedural. I was right. On the last Friday of June, Verna called Elias, sweet as pie, and invited us to a family dinner. Not a regular Sunday dinner, a celebration. Saturday, the 11th of July. Everyone would be there. Roscoe, Dex, and Annika, 2 aunts, an uncle, assorted cousins, 14 people in all. The occasion, she said, was honoring Opal's memory and settling the family's future, all together, with love. She'd even arranged for the paperwork people to come by so everything could be wrapped up in one happy evening. The paperwork people. At dinner. On a Saturday. You know that feeling when a puzzle piece clicks and the picture is worse than you thought? I called Mr. Feldstein first thing Monday. And Mr. Feldstein, careful gray man that he is, cleared his throat and told me that he'd been meaning to call me because that very morning he'd received a courtesy copy of something filed at the county courthouse. A petition. Filed by Verna Hale, drafted by one Bram Corliss, attorney at law. A petition to remove me, Marin Voss, as trustee of the Opal Hale Family Trust on grounds of, and I'm quoting the filing, hostility toward beneficiaries, self-interested obstruction, and concerns regarding the trustee's judgment and sobriety. Sobriety. There it was, the harvest. The hearing was set for Monday, July the 13th, 9 a.m., 2 days after the dinner. Now, a petition like that, on its own, is weak. Mr. Feldstein said as much. Courts don't remove trustees because a family is annoyed. You need evidence. You need incidents. You need, ideally, witnesses. 14 of them, say, gathered under a brass chandelier, watching the trustee come apart at a family dinner 2 days before the hearing. I want to be careful here and tell you only what I could prove, because that's the rule I live by. At that point, I could prove there was a petition. I could prove the dinner was scheduled 40 hours before the hearing. I could prove 8 months of a story being built about my stability. What I could not prove, what I did not honestly let myself believe yet, was that anyone in that family would go further than theater. That changed on Friday, July the 3rd, 8 days before the dinner. Stay with me now, and if you're the kind of person who has ever been called crazy by the people rewriting your story, subscribe, because what happens next is the reason this channel exists. The 3rd of July, the whole family gathered at the farmhouse for Roscoe's birthday cookout. I almost didn't go. I'm glad I did, and here's the strange part. The thing that broke the case open wasn't me being clever. It was a printer being slow. I'd gone inside to use the bathroom, the one off the back hallway, past the little den Verna calls her office. A desk, a filing cabinet, an ancient printer, and the family iPad that lives on the charger there like a houseplant. The printer was chugging away as I passed. Somebody had sent it a job and wandered off. And as I came back down the hallway, it finished, and the last page slid into the tray face up. I want to be precise about what happened next, because precision is the whole difference between me and them. I did not search that room. I did not open a drawer, a cabinet, or a single file. I stood in a hallway of a house I was invited into, and I looked down at a printer tray in plain view, and I read what was sitting on top of it. It was a draft. A supplemental filing, formatted for the probate court, letterhead of Bram Corliss, attorney at law. Caption, in re, the Opal Hale Family Trust. And a heading, bold, halfway down the first page. Supplemental declaration regarding trustee's impairment. TOBE, executed following July 11th family gathering. To be executed following the July 11th family gathering. The declaration was pre-written. Let me say that again, because it took my breath somewhere it has still not fully come back from. The account of my behavior at a dinner that had not happened yet was already typed. It described me, in the past tense, dated July 11th, as visibly intoxicated, slurring, unsteady, emotionally volatile in front of the assembled family, with signature lines at the bottom, 5 of them. Verna Hale, Dexter Hale, 2 of the aunts, and a 5th line, blank but labeled, that I will come back to. Because that 5th line is the reason one of the 3 marriages that ended was mine. I stood in that hallway for maybe 10 seconds. Burgers were being flipped 40 feet away. Somebody was laughing at something Dex said. And I did what I am trained to do when I encounter compromised material. I documented it without altering it. I took out my phone and photographed every page where it lay, in the tray, with the den doorway and the wallpaper visible in frame so no one could ever claim the pages were staged somewhere else. Time-stamped. Geotagged. Then I put my phone away and I did not touch a single sheet of paper. Who touched this and when? Not me. Never me. That's the whole game. I was 3 steps from the kitchen when the iPad on the charger lit up and chimed. The family iPad. The one signed into the family's shared account since roughly the Obama administration, the one the grandkids play games on, the one. As everyone in that family knew and constantly joked about, that mirrored Dex's text messages because Dex had synced it years ago to show off a boat listing and never fixed it. The screen was facing the hallway. The preview banner was right there, white letters on gray, from a contact saved as Mom, And I read it the way you rate a road sign at speed, involuntarily. Whole, getting the refill twos. Half in her glass is plenty. She's small. You just make sure the camera. The preview cut off at camera. I stood there and I felt something I can only describe as cold clarity, not rage. Rage came later, in small installments, at odd hours. In that hallway, what I felt was my job. Because I have read toxicology intake forms for 11 years, and I know exactly what half in her glass is plenty, she's small is. That is dosing language. That is somebody who has thought about body weight. I photographed the banner, time-stamped. Then the screen went dark, and I walked back out into the sunlight, and I ate a hamburger next to my husband, and I complimented Verna's potato salad, and I have never in my life been more polite. Here's the part that's hard to admit. For about a day and a half, I tried to build the innocent version. I'm trained to consider alternative explanations. It's literally in my audit manual. Maybe refill was Verna's blood pressure medication. Maybe her glass was, I don't know, a cousin's kid's juice cup. I sat at my kitchen table on the 4th of July with fireworks going off over the neighborhood, and I tried, genuinely tried, to make those pages and that message mean something that would let me keep my family. I couldn't. And when I accepted that, I stopped being a daughter-in-law and became what Opal hired. Monday morning, July the 6th, 5 days to dinner. I took a personal day and I built the file. If you've been here before, you know this is my favorite part, and I'm going to give it to you the way I gave it to my attorney. Itemized. Item 1. Photographs of the pre-written declaration, 6 pages, metadata intact, showing a sworn account of my intoxication drafted before the event it describes. Item 2. Photograph of the message preview. Getting the refill twos. Half in her glass is plenty. She's small. Item 3. The petition itself, public record, filed June 29th, alleging concerns about my sobriety. A word choice that now read less like an insult and more like a table of contents. Item 4. My Navy folder. 8 months of dates, times, and verbatim quotes. Rigid. Strange, leaning on things. The story, in sequence, with witnesses attached. Item 5. And this one I obtained the boring, legal way, because there is no other way I do things. A records request through my own physician, confirming what 9 years of family dinners could confirm. No prescriptions, no treatment, no history. A clean baseline. If anyone was ever going to claim there were substances in Marin Voss, I wanted the before picture on file. Item 6. A letter from Mr. Feldstein's office, dated that Wednesday, formally reciting my administration of the trust to date. Every tax payment on time, every statement reconciled, every decision documented. The word the letter used was exemplary. Mr. Feldstein does not use adjectives recreationally. And item 7. The one that still makes my hands cold. Tuesday, July the 7th. Twos, just like the message said. I happened to be parked across the street from the pharmacy on Grange Road at 4:40 in the afternoon. I say happened? I sat there for 2 hours with a thermos of tea. At 4:52, Verna Hale walked out with a small white bag, got into her Buick, and drove home. I photographed it from a public street. I couldn't see what was in the bag, and I want to be honest that I couldn't. But timelines are my profession, and that photograph slotted into the timeline like a rib into a spine. Then I hired Constance Rue. Mr. Feldstein, bless him, is an estate planner. What I needed now was a litigator, and Constance Rue is the kind of litigator other lawyers describe with weather metaphors. I sat in her office that Wednesday, laid out all 7 items in order, and watched her read for 20 minutes without speaking. When she finished, she squared the pages, looked at me, and said the most clarifying sentence anyone said to me all year. Mrs. Voss, you understand this stopped being a family matter at item 2. We talked for 3 hours, and we made 2 decisions that everything afterward hangs on, so I want you to have them clearly. Decision 1, I would go to the dinner. Constance hated this at first. Her instinct was to keep me away and shred the petition in court with the file we already had. But a pre-written declaration only proves intent if you can tie it to an act, and an act requires an event, and I made an argument to her that I will stand behind for the rest of my life. They were going to hold that dinner with, or without me, in front of 14 people, including elderly relatives, with a dose drink and play. Someone needed to be in that room who knew what was happening. Someone who does not drink does not panic, and documents everything. Decision 2, nobody would ingest anything. Whatever went into whatever glass was leaving that house as evidence, sealed, logged, and untouched, or it wasn't leaving at all. I want to be unmistakably clear about this, because the title of this story is going to make some of you think I let a man drink his mother's poison. I did not. I am not them. What I did was worse for them and better for me and infinitely more legal. I let them watch it almost happen. Constance also did one more thing that Wednesday. She sent a quiet records, subpoena connected to the pending Monday hearing, and she made 2 phone calls. One to a retired detective named Ortiz, who does chain of custody consulting, and one on Friday morning to the county sheriff's office, where a report was opened and given a number. I had that number written in ink on the inside of my wristline. I'm joking. It was in my purse, laminated. You know me by now. So, Saturday, July the 11th. 6 days after a printer told me the truth. 40 hours before a courtroom expected me to be a slurring wreck on 5 sworn signatures. I wore a gray dress. I brought a lemon cake. And in my handbag, next to the laminated card, I carried 3 things from my own professional kit. Nitrile gloves, 2 sterile 50 milliliter sample vials with tamper-evident seals, and a chain of custody form, blank, with my name already printed at the top of line 1. Family doesn't keep receipts. Watch me. The farmhouse smelled like rosemary and furniture polish. Verna had used the lace tablecloth. The 60-year-old one, Opal's mother's, the one that only comes out when the family is performing for itself. 14 place settings under the brass chandelier. Candles. The good crystal. And at the far end of the table, past the aunts and the cousins and a centerpiece of white hydrangeas, sat 2 folding chairs and a card table that told you everything. A stack of folders, a leather portfolio, and 2 strangers. The first stranger was Bram Corliss, attorney at law. Younger than I expected. Very white teeth. He shook my hand and said, "So great to finally meet you," which is a remarkable thing to say to a woman you have already drafted sworn testimony against. The second stranger was a small, tidy woman in her 60s named Mrs. Odom, who had a stamp, a journal, and absolutely no idea what she'd been booked into. A mobile notary. Verna introduced her to the room like a party favor. "So we can wrap everything up tonight, all official!" And Mrs. Odom smiled politely and checked her watch, and I heard her tell Corliss, in the voice of a woman with a life, "I do need to be gone by 8:30. 8:30. Say what you want about my mother-in-law. She built me a ticking clock and set it herself." Here was Verna's evening, as she'd designed it. Dinner at 7, wine flowing. Somewhere in there, a dosed glass finds its way to me. By 7:45, I'm slurring in front of 14 relatives and 1 licensed notary. Corliss shepherds the family through signing a unified family resolution. I gotta look at those folders later. We'll get there. Mrs. Odom stamps everything by 8:30. 5 sworn declarations about my condition get executed following the July 11th family gathering, exactly as the draft said. And Monday at 9 a.m., a judge reads about the trustee who fell apart in front of her whole family 2 days earlier. Clean. Contained, catered. But here's what Verna Hale did not know. She did not know about a slow printer. She did not know about a chiming iPad. She did not know there was a report number sleeping in my handbag, or that the woman she'd been calling rigid for 8 months had spent 11 years being paid, specifically to notice when a sample has been touched. And she had forgotten. She had genuinely, fatally forgotten that I don't drink. Dinner started at 7:05. I know because I checked. Because by then I was running a timeline in my head the way I run one at work, in clean 5-minute blocks. Roscoe carved. Dex told a story about a pontoon boat that had half the table crying with laughter, and I watched Annika watch him with an expression I recognized from my own mirror. Elias sat beside me, quiet, squeezing my knee once under the table in a way I would spend the next several months trying to interpret. At 7:38, Verna stood, went to the sideboard, and began pouring wine. 11 glasses on a tray, passed down the table hand to hand, and 1 glass, one, that never touched the tray. She carried it herself, both hands, the length of the room, and set it down at my place with a little flourish. "I poured this one just for you, sweetheart. It's the good bottle. Opal's favorite. Opal's favorite." She invoked the dead woman whose trust she was robbing to garnish the glass she'd dosed for the trustee. I want you to sit with that the way I had to, in real time, smiling. I said thank you. I noted the warmth of the bowl, the faint grit at the wine line, her eyes on my mouth. And then I said the truest sentence I'd said all evening. You know me. I'll need my limes, my little joke. My 9-year-old quirk. Half the table chuckled on cue, the way families laugh at the jokes that have calcified into furniture. And I stood, picked up my glass. Mine just needs my fingerprints anyway, doesn't it? And carried it with me toward the kitchen. 40 seconds. That's what I needed, and that's what I took. In the little powder room off the kitchen hallway, door locked, water running, I put on nitrile gloves. I broke the seal on the first sterile vial, poured half the wine in. You learn to pour without a tremor in my line of work, or you find other work. Capped it, sealed it, and wrote on the label in block letters. Contents of wine glass presented to M. Voss by V. Hail, the 11th of July, 1941. Then the chain of custody form. Received by Marin Voss. Date. Time. Sealed vial into the padded pocket of my handbag. Gloves off. Into a zip bag. Into the handbag, too, because gloves are evidence of care, and care is evidence of truth. The glass went back with me to the table, half full now, which is exactly what a glass looks like when a woman has been sipping it. I set it down at my place. I did not drink it. I cut 2 thin slices of lime for my sparkling water, floated them, and sat. And for the next 20 minutes, I watched Verna Hale relax by degrees, because from her end of the table, the level in my wine glass was dropping in her imagination sip by sip, and her whole plan was coming in on schedule. At 8:01, Corliss stood up and tapped his portfolio, and the folders came out. I'll describe them, because they matter. A family unity resolution. A document with no legal force whatsoever, pure theater, expressing the family's unanimous desire to sell the lake property. Beneath it, with real force, consent forms for the beneficiaries supporting Verna's petition to remove me. And beneath those, pre-tabbed with little arrow stickers, the declarations. The ones I'd already photographed in a printer tray, 5 signature lines. I had seen 4 of the names in the draft. Verna, Dex, 2 aunts. At that table, at 8:04 on the 11th of July, I finally saw the 5th line filled in, typed, waiting. The 5th declarant, the 5th member of my family, prepared to swear to a court that I had been visibly intoxicated at a dinner where I drank sparkling water with 2 limes, was Elias Hale. My husband. I want to tell you my heart did something dramatic. It didn't. It did the thing hearts actually do at the moment of the worst news. It kept the beat. I filed it. That's the only verb I have. I filed it, and I checked the clock, because Mrs. Odom had just checked hers, and it was 8:06, and the evening had 24 minutes of notary left in it, and I still had one move to make. Here's how the swap actually happened, and I'm sorry to everyone who imagined something out of a spy film. It was laundry-level domestic. At 8:09, Verna asked Dex to run to the den for the good pen, the fountain pen, for the signing, for the ceremony of it all. Dex went. And I did what I have done at every family dinner for 9 years, the thing that made me invisible and indispensable in the same gesture. I stood and started consolidating dishes to clear space for the folders. Nobody looks at the woman clearing plates. I have been the woman clearing plates my entire married life. I cleared Dex's bread plate. I cleared mine. And when I set the water pitcher down between our places, my wine glass was in front of his chair and his was in front of mine. Same crystal, same pour line. 18 inches of tablecloth. It took 2 seconds, and it was, I'd remind everyone, entirely legal. They were both, technically, glasses of wine at a table I was setting. And before anyone writes the comment, no, he was never going to drink it. The sheriff's report number was in my bag, the sample was sealed, and I was watching that glass the way I watch a specimen cooler in an open parking lot. If it had gotten within 2 inches of his mouth, I'd have knocked it out of his hand myself and taken the stain on the lace as a bonus. But I'd read that message on the iPad. Half in her glass is plenty. You just make sure the camera. And I understood something about my mother-in-law that gave me total confidence in what would happen next. Verna's plan required watching. She had to watch me drink, which meant that for the whole back half of that dinner, some part of her attention was welded to a specific glass of wine. All I did was move it in front of the person she actually loved. Dex came back with a fountain pen at 8:13. Corliss started passing folders. Mrs. Odom uncapped her stamp and set out her journal, and Roscoe. Sweet, oblivious Roscoe, who I would learn within the hour knew nothing at all. Roscoe stood up at the head of the table, lifted his glass, and said, "Before we sign anything, I want a drink to my mother." To Opal. 14 chairs scraped. 14 people stood. 14 glasses rose into the light of the brass chandelier. And Dexter Hale, the favorite son, wrapped his hand around the glass in front of him, tilted it toward his father, said, "To Grandma Opal," and raised his mother's wine to his lips. I have replayed the next 4 seconds more times than I can count, and it never gets less astonishing. Verna saw it. Of course she saw it. She had been tracking that glass all night, the way a hawk tracks a field mouse, and somewhere between Roscoe's toast and Dex's elbow bending, her eyes did the math. The pour line, the placement, the chair, and every drop of blood left her face at once. She didn't think. That's the thing about a plan built on secrecy. It has no protocol for daylight. She lunged. 66 years old, across 2 place settings and a hydrangea centerpiece, and she slapped the glass out of her own son's hand hard enough that it flew. The crystal caught the edge of the table and burst. Cabernet went up Dex's shirt, across the folders, across the tab declarations, across 60 years of heirloom lace, and into the ringing silence that followed. 14 people standing, glasses frozen mid-air, a notary with her stamp uncapped. Verna Hale, breathing hard, hydrangea petals on her sleeve, said the 6 words that ended her life as she knew it. That one was Marin's. Nobody moved. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed, and I set down my sparkling water, 2 limes, and I asked the only question that needed asking in the flattest, calmest voice I own. The voice I use for audit findings. "Why can't Dex drink my wine? Verna?" She looked at me, and I watched. Everyone watched as she tried to find a sentence. Any sentence. The woman had a sentence for everything. She had run that family on sentences for 40 years. And in the moment it actually mattered, in front of every witness she herself had assembled, she stood there with her mouth open and nothing came out. It was Dex who broke. Dex, dripping, staring at the red, spreading through his shirt like a wound he was only now allowed to feel, whispered, "Mom," and then louder, cracking. "Mom, what was in it?" And Verna. And this is the part I truly could not have scripted. Verna turned to the one person she had trained her whole life to reach for when the room went wrong. She turned to my husband. "Elias," she said. "Elias, tell her we agreed this was for the family. We agreed." I watched Elias's face do something I'd never seen it do. I watched it try to stay neutral and fail. And in that failure, in front of his father and his brother and his aunts, and a notary from an agency in Millbrook, I got my answer about the 5th signature line, and about the 3 quiet weeks in June, and about a man who had known. Not about the wine. I'll give him that. I believe to this day he didn't know about the wine. But who had known about the petition, and the declaration, and the dinners, real purpose, and had squeezed my knee under the table at 7:15 and said nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I want that on the record, whatever record this is. I reached into my handbag and I took out 3 things and set them on the dry corner of the lace. 1, 2, 3, like exhibits, because that's what they were. 1. A sealed 50 milliliter vial, half full of dark red wine, tamper strip intact, labeled in block letters. 2. A chain of custody form, 1 line completed, my signature, 1941. 3. A laminated card with a case number from the county sheriff's office opened the previous morning. At 7:41 tonight, I said, to the table, to all of them, at the volume you'd use to read a grocery list, I sampled the glass Verna carried to my seat. The seal hasn't been broken. On Monday morning, it goes to an independent, accredited laboratory. Not mine, for obvious reasons. Under this case number, which Deputy Aldana at the county sheriff's office is expecting. Nothing that happens in this room tonight changes any of that. It's already true. It's been true since 7:41. Then I looked at Bram Corliss, who had gone the color of his own letterhead, and I said, "Mr. Corliss, your declarations are on the table. You may want to check the dates against reality before anyone signs them. And you should know they were photographed in draft form 8 days ago, metadata intact, in this house. I have seen many people leave many rooms. I have never seen anyone leave a room like Bram Corliss left that dining room. He didn't pack the folders so much as scoop them, wine-soaked and bleeding red ink, into his portfolio, and he was headlights in the driveway inside 90 seconds. Mrs. Odom, the notary, capped her stamp, closed her journal, looked around that table at 14 frozen hails, and said, with the dignity of a woman who charges by the appointment, "I don't believe I'll be notarizing anything this evening." It was 8:26. She beat her own deadline by 4 minutes. I held the door for her. She squeezed my arm on the way out, and to this day, I don't fully know what she thought had happened, but I know whose side she was on. Behind me, the dining room came apart in slow motion. Not loudly. That's the thing nobody tells you about the worst night of a family's life. It's quiet. Roscoe stood at the head of the table, holding his untouched glass, looking at his wife of 41 years like the floor of the house he grew up in had opened. He asked her one question. "V, did you put my name on that court paper?" Because he'd seen the petition caption in the spilled folders, and there were 2 petitioners listed, and one of them was Roscoe Hale, and Roscoe Hale had never been told. She had signed him on. Forged? Authorized? The lawyers would spend months on the verb. Roscoe didn't need the verb. He put his glass down, still full, walked out the back door, crossed the yard in the dark, and let himself into Opal's little brick house. He slept there that night. As far as I know, he never spent another night under the brass chandelier again. Annika didn't yell either. Annika did something colder and better. She asked questions like the nurse she is, in triage order. "Dex, look at me. Did you know what was in it?" Silence. "Did you know what tonight was for?" Silence. "Dex, the lake money. Why do you need the lake money?" And when the silence held a third time, she picked up her purse, told the aunts goodnight. She thanked them for coming. I think about that a lot, and drove herself home. The demand letter from Dex's lender was in their mailbox, certified, the following Tuesday. She opened it. First, she'd heard of $180,000 secured against land her husband never owned, and Elias and me, my husband and me. We stood in the driveway at 9 p.m. next to our car, and he said, "Marin, I can explain the signature page." And I believed him. That's the terrible part. I believed he could explain it, because there's always an explanation. There had been 9 years of explanations, each one reasonable, each one a small door closing. I said, "Not tonight. Tonight, I need you to drive me home, and I need you not to talk." And to his credit, the last thing my husband ever did entirely right was exactly that. He drove. He didn't talk. The radio stayed off. And somewhere on Route 9, in the dark, with a sealed vial of evidence riding in my handbag like a heartbeat, I understood that I was going to keep the trust and lose the marriage and that Opal. God, Opal, had probably known both of those things when she signed. You don't pick a trustee because you love them. You pick a trustee because they'll tell you a true number, even when the room wants a false one. Here's the true number, Opal, 3. Now the aftermath? Compressed, because consequences don't arrive like fireworks. They arrive like mail. Monday, 9 a.m. The removal hearing lasted 11 minutes. Bram Corliss had withdrawn from the case by email at 6:40 that morning. Verna's new counsel asked to dismiss the petition. Constance Rue stood up, said the words "dismissed with prejudice," and got them, which means it can never be filed again. Constance also filed a bar complaint regarding a certain predated declaration. That process took 9 months and ended with Mr. Corliss practicing considerably less law than before. Tuesday, the vial went to the independent lab, transfer logged, seal photographed, my signature joined by a courier's and a technician's. The most beautiful chain of custody form I have ever been part of. Thursday, the report came back. The wine contained a prescription sedative at several times a normal dose. The same medication, it would turn out, refilled at the pharmacy on Grange Road on Tuesday, July the 7th, at 4:52 p.m. I did not gasp when Constance read it to me. I just felt the last alternative explanation die quietly in its sleep. The district attorney took it from there. "I'll spare you 8 months of procedure and give you the ledger." Verna Hale pleaded to adulterating a drink with intent to injure. No prison. Her age, her clean record, her lawyer's very good September. 3 years probation, a fine, mandatory counseling, and a protective order with my name on it. The plea hearing was the only time I saw her after the dinner. She looked small. She looked at me once, and I waited to feel triumphant, and instead I felt the thing I imagine surgeons feel, not joy, Completion. Roscoe filed in October. 41 years. He told me, sitting at my kitchen table with coffee, he insisted on making himself, that it wasn't even the wine that ended it. It was my name on that paper, Marin. She spent my word like it was hers to spend. The divorce was quiet. He kept the brick house. I sold it to him from the trust for exactly the appraised value, not $1 of favor in either direction, because that's what Opal hired. Annika filed in November. Once the forensic accountant Constance recommended finished mapping where $180,000 had gone and where the next $180,000 had been meant to come from, the lender got a judgment against Dex, the lake. Opal's lake, with the cabin her husband built, never secured a dime of it because it never could have. It was behind the wall the whole time. Dex sells boats now, at a dealership 2 counties over. I hear he's good at it. I believe that completely. And Elias. My Elias. He never signed anything. That stayed true. What he'd done was know. 3 weeks of knowing there was a petition, a plan, a dinner with a purpose, and choosing his mother's peace over my name. In January, 1 year almost to the day after Opal died, our divorce finalized. No lawyers screaming. 2 calm people and a table, which is the only way I do anything. He wrote me a letter last month. It was a good letter. Honest, finally. I read it twice, and I filed it. Navy folder, elastic band. And that is where it lives. A reconciliation happened, just not the kind they wanted. Verna sent word through an aunt in the spring that she was ready to put it behind us as a family, which is a masterpiece of a sentence if you diagram it. Notice who does the putting and who is the behind. I declined, in writing, 3 lines. But Roscoe has a standing chair at my table every other Sunday. Annika and I talk on Thursdays. Her daughter calls me Auntie M. And on the 5th anniversary of Opal's death, 3 years from now, when the trust gives me discretion, the cabin at Cade Lake goes into a preservation arrangement with lake access held for the family. The actual family, the ones who showed up. Exactly the way a bookkeeper from a brick house would have wanted. Reconciliation is available in this family. It just runs through my terms now, and my terms are the same ones I offer a laboratory. Full documentation, no tampering, and everybody signs their real name. So here's what I learned, and then I'll let you go. They tell you family doesn't keep receipts, and they say it like it's love. It isn't love. It's accounting. They're accounting with the ledger turned so only they can read it. Real love survives daylight. Real love can stand next to a true number without flinching. The people who need you undocumented are telling you exactly what they plan to do in the dark, and you are allowed to write it down. Keeping the receipt is not the betrayal. It never was. The receipt is just the truth, wearing a date. And one more thing from Opal, free of charge. Watch your glass, honey. If this story found you on a night when your family is rewriting who you are, drop a comment and tell me. What's the one receipt you're glad you kept? Share this with the friend who's always the one clearing the plates. Like the video if Mrs. Odom capping, her stamp gave you the same piece it gave me, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because there is always a next story. Stay calm. Keep your receipts. I'll see you in the next one.